As Clara stood in the grand hall of the mansion, her hands trembled with the weight of what she had achieved. The world knew her name now, Clara Remington, the woman who had risen from nothing to claim an empire. But the legacy she had reclaimed felt heavier than ever. The Hadleys' sins had been exposed, and now Clara's every move was being watched. She had fought for this moment, for this empire. But now that it was hers, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had lost herself in the process. What would her father have thought of her actions? Would he be proud of how she had rebuilt the business? Or would he have felt that she had lost her moral compass? Clara had always imagined that wealth and power would give her the answers she sought, but now, with everything she had ever wanted at her fingertips, she was more uncertain than ever. Her father's portrait hung on the wall in the study, his eyes watching her as if waiting for a response. Clara took a deep breath, acknowledging that the road ahead wasn't just about financial success. It was about making peace with her past and ensuring her future would be one of integrity. As Clara tried to balance the growth of her empire with her moral compass, she faced the harsh reality of the business world. Her company was now a global entity, with operations and partnerships spanning multiple continents. But with every new deal came the temptation to compromise. "There's always a price to pay for success," Vincent had said to her when he first offered to merge their empires. Now, Clara understood the truth in his words. She had earned her place at the top, but she could feel the pressure mounting to take shortcuts in order to expand further. One deal in particular, an investment in a controversial tech project, promised to bring in enormous profits but involved dubious business practices. Clara sat at her desk, looking at the proposal, her thoughts swirling. Would it make her empire stronger, or would it be the first step toward losing herself? The weight of this decision was the hardest Clara had ever faced. If she agreed, it would mean more wealth and control, but if she refused, it could cost her dearly. What was she willing to sacrifice for the sake of her empire? The decision Clara made weighed heavily on her soul. She chose not to take the risky investment, even though it meant sacrificing a significant opportunity to grow her empire. She could feel the disappointment from her business partners, the silent judgment from her competitors. Clara knew she had done the right thing, but the consequences were more immediate than she expected. "You don't belong here," one of her rivals whispered in a private meeting. "You'll never be taken seriously if you keep playing by the rules." The words stung, but Clara stood firm. She wasn't like the Hadleys. She wouldn't compromise her values for the sake of easy success. But as the pressure mounted, she began to question if this was truly the path to lasting success. Was true power in maintaining ethical integrity? Or was it in doing whatever it took to stay on top? The guilt was beginning to erode Clara's confidence. Had she made the wrong choice by playing it safe? Or was she simply following a path that would ultimately make her feel proud of her legacy? It was a question she would struggle with for years to come. Despite her growing empire, Clara's relationship with her mother remained strained. Clara knew her mother had always trusted the Hadleys, believing they were family. But after the revelations about the fraudulent inheritance, Clara's mother struggled to see her daughter as the true heir to the family's legacy. Clara had spent years rebuilding everything her father had lost, but her mother couldn't let go of the guilt she felt for trusting the Hadleys. Clara reached out to her, hoping for reconciliation, but the emotional distance was still palpable. "I never wanted any of this," her mother confessed one evening, her voice cracked with regret. "I never wanted to hurt you, Clara. I was just so blinded by the love I thought I had for them." Clara could feel her mother's heart breaking, but she couldn't undo the past. The Hadleys had taken everything from them, and now Clara had rebuilt it all. She wanted to help her mother heal, but Clara knew she couldn't force forgiveness. The wound was too deep. "I understand, Mom," Clara said softly, her voice filled with compassion. "But we need to heal. We can't keep looking backward." And for the first time, Clara felt the weight of her past begin to loosen. Clara's empire continued to grow, but as it did, so did her list of enemies. One such rival was Damien Cordero, a slick tech mogul with vast ambitions and a ruthless streak. He had been trying to undermine Clara's efforts, offering her deals that seemed too good to be true. He even suggested that they merge their companies, claiming that it would lead to unprecedented success. But Clara had learned to recognize manipulation. Damien wasn't interested in a partnership, he wanted control. Clara realized that this was his endgame, to consolidate power and force her into submission. She wasn't going to let him. With her legal team at her side, Clara started preparing a counter-move that would not only outsmart Damien, but also expose his unethical practices. Clara knew it was risky, but she couldn't sit back and let him take what was rightfully hers. Her empire was built on trust and integrity, and Damien didn't belong in it. The battle between them would shape the next chapter of her empire's history, and Clara was ready for the challenge. As Clara continued to build her empire, she found herself questioning those closest to her. Her most trusted advisor, Jenna, had proven loyal in the past, but Clara couldn't help but feel that Jenna had been holding back some information. There were moments of hesitation, subtle glances that made Clara wonder. Was Jenna working in her best interest? Or was there something more? Clara decided to test her loyalty. One evening, after a meeting with potential investors, Clara asked Jenna to stay behind. "Is there anything you're not telling me?" Clara asked, her voice calm but firm. Jenna hesitated for a moment, but then she confessed. "There's a deal I've been considering, a risky one that could have massive payoffs." Clara listened carefully, her pulse quickening. It was a deal that would expand their empire, but at the cost of ethical compromises. Jenna was the last person Clara had trusted, and now she realized that even the people closest to her could be swayed by power and greed. The trust had been broken, and Clara knew she had to make a decision. Would she choose loyalty over greed, or was this the price of being at the top? Clara's worst fears were realized when she discovered that Jenna had been secretly working with Damien Cordero. Jenna had been feeding him inside information, betraying Clara's trust in the worst way possible. Clara felt the sting of this betrayal deep in her chest. She had spent so much time building relationships with people she thought she could rely on, only to be betrayed again. "I didn't mean to hurt you," Jenna said when Clara confronted her. "But Damien promised me something bigger, something I couldn't refuse." The coldness of Jenna's words stung more than the betrayal itself. Clara had tried to give Jenna the benefit of the doubt, but now she saw the truth. Jenna had used Clara's trust to get ahead. Clara knew what she had to do. She could no longer afford to be sentimental. Jenna had to go. But as Clara watched Jenna leave, she couldn't help but wonder if the cost of success had been too great. She had sacrificed so much for this empire, but now she was paying the price. The betrayal by Jenna left Clara feeling isolated and vulnerable. She had worked so hard to rebuild the empire, but now she felt like she couldn't trust anyone. As Clara continued to expand the business, she made it a point to surround herself with people who shared her values, those who didn't just want a profit, but who truly believed in making a positive impact. She spent time meeting with potential partners, advisors, and business leaders who would help her build the empire the right way. Clara knew the journey wouldn't be easy, but this time, she wouldn't let trust be a commodity. She wasn't just focused on expanding the empire, she was focused on building relationships that would last and make a true difference in the world. Clara knew that her business could thrive, but it had to be built on a foundation of trust and integrity. As Clara worked to rebuild her empire, she found herself at a crossroads. The journey had been filled with betrayals, loss, and sacrifice, but she realized that if she was going to truly move forward, she had to heal from the wounds of the past. Clara had spent so long fighting for what was rightfully hers that she had neglected the emotional toll it had taken on her. The mansion, the wealth, it had all come at a cost. She had lost relationships, trust, and peace of mind. But now, Clara knew that healing wasn't just about business. It was about forgiving herself, letting go of the past, and starting anew. She reached out to her mother, hoping to reconnect and heal the rift between them. It wasn't easy, but they began to rebuild their relationship. True healing required patience, and Clara realized that it was a journey, not a destination. Clara finally reached a point where the pieces of her life and empire fell into place. She had faced her past, made the difficult decisions, and built a foundation that would last for generations. The mansion, once a symbol of her pain and betrayal, had become the heart of a new beginning. Clara had redefined her family's legacy, not with revenge, but with compassion, growth, and empowerment. She had not only taken back what was hers, she had built something greater, an empire based on ethical values and social responsibility. Clara knew the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. There would be new challenges, and the weight of leadership would always be heavy. But for the first time, she felt a sense of peace. The future was hers to build, and Clara was ready to make her mark, one built on strength, compassion, and integrity. Clara spent hours alone in the mansion's library, staring at old family portraits. The house was now more than just a symbol of inheritance. It was a reminder of everything her family had lost, everything she had fought for. She'd known that her father's death had been sudden, but it wasn't until recently that she uncovered something chilling. Her father had kept letters from the Hadleys, detailing their manipulation of her family's assets. These letters didn't just expose the betrayal, they revealed a well-crafted scheme designed to separate Clara's family from their wealth. As she read through the correspondence, Clara realized that her father had known all along that the Hadleys were corrupt, and he had been fighting back in his own way. The realization left Clara feeling conflicted. He had fought to protect their family's legacy, but had he sacrificed everything, including his family's trust, to hold on to it? The truth about the past had finally come to light, and Clara knew that closure was the next step in her journey. She had to let go of the hurt and move forward. Clara felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that this new partnership would help her make an even greater impact on the world. Clara's relationships continued to evolve, particularly with her mother. After a heartfelt conversation, Clara and her mother finally reached a place of understanding. It wasn't easy, but Clara knew that she needed to heal the past in order to move forward. Their bond grew stronger, and Clara began to see that forgiveness was not just about letting go of resentment. It was about accepting the people you loved for who they were, flaws and all. "I never meant to hold you back," her mother said, tears in her eyes. "I just didn't know how to let go." Clara reached out and held her mother's hand, offering the reassurance that they could both heal together. Clara realized that in order to truly move forward, she needed to embrace the future, but never forget the lessons of the past. This moment marked the beginning of a new chapter in their relationship, a chapter built on trust, love, and forgiveness. Clara stood before the gathering at her company's headquarters, the atmosphere heavy with anticipation. She had accomplished so much, but this moment was about more than business. It was about healing, about redemption. "We've come a long way," Clara began, her voice steady as she addressed her employees, family, and business partners. "This company is not just about profits. It's about what we do with the wealth we've created. It's about giving back to the world." The room fell silent, the impact of her words settling in. Clara's empire wasn't just a business. It was a vision, a force for positive change. The transformation was complete. Clara had faced the darkness, the betrayals, and the overwhelming pressure, but in the end, she had found peace. She had rebuilt not just her family's legacy, but a new future for everyone. As she looked out at the people who had stood by her side, Clara smiled. This was her legacy. This was her victory. Clara had spent so long fighting for what was rightfully hers that she hadn't allowed herself the luxury of truly living. Now that her empire was in full swing, she was faced with a new challenge: how to use her influence for good. The world saw her as a success, a woman who had gone from maid to mogul. But Clara knew that real success wasn't just about financial gain. It was about the impact she could have. She wanted her empire to be more than just a profitable business. It had to be a force for change. Clara launched new initiatives aimed at restructuring the workforce, focusing on creating equitable opportunities for those from underprivileged backgrounds. She invested in education programs, community outreach, and environmentally sustainable projects. Every step Clara took was a reflection of her desire to not just build wealth, but to leave behind a legacy of empowerment. The more she expanded, the more Clara realized that this was the true goal: to make the world a better place. She had reclaimed the mansion, the fortune, and the family name, but now she was working to give back. Now that Clara understood the full extent of her family's history, she was more determined than ever to lead with purpose. It wasn't enough for her to simply claim her inheritance and expand her empire. She wanted to change the business world, to create a company that stood for something greater than just profits. Clara began implementing new initiatives, empowering marginalized communities and creating jobs for those who had been left behind. She poured resources into sustainability, ensuring her company would have a positive impact on the environment. Her vision was clear. She wasn't just building a business, she was creating a legacy of compassion and ethical responsibility. The challenges were overwhelming, but Clara found herself driven by something deeper than money or power. She was finally using her position to create positive change, and with each new initiative, she felt herself growing into the leader she had always dreamed of becoming. This was her purpose, her true calling. Clara was building an empire that would last for generations. But more importantly, she was building a legacy that truly mattered. Despite the success Clara was experiencing, the emotional wounds of the past still lingered. Her relationship with her mother was improving, but the scars from their estrangement couldn't be erased overnight. There were still moments of silence, moments when Clara could feel the weight of everything she had missed. Her mother had always been the backbone of the family, but she had never understood the business world the way Clara did. "I just wanted to protect you, Clara," her mother would say, voice full of emotion. "I didn't understand why you had to take everything on yourself." Clara had wanted to tell her that she didn't have to protect her anymore, that Clara had grown into someone who could stand on her own. But those words felt incomplete. Clara realized her mother's love was born from a fear of the unknown. She had been afraid that Clara's ambition would lead her astray. But now Clara was learning to accept her mother's love as it was, and she was learning to forgive both her mother and herself. Healing was still a work in progress, but Clara was moving forward. Clara's empire had flourished under her leadership, but there was still room for growth. One day, she received a surprising proposal from Carlos Rivera, a young entrepreneur with a reputation for shaking up the tech world. He wanted to partner with Clara to create a new division of her company focused on innovative technology and social impact. Clara was hesitant. She had worked so hard to protect her empire from the greed of others. Was she ready to trust again? But Carlos was different. His vision was aligned with Clara's. He wasn't just interested in making money. He wanted to make a real impact, especially in underprivileged communities. After several meetings, Clara realized that Carlos had the same ethics and integrity she valued. She agreed to the partnership, feeling hopeful about the future of her empire. This partnership wasn't just about expanding her business. It was about taking the next step toward creating change. Clara felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that this new partnership would help her make an even greater impact on the world. Clara's relationships continued to evolve, particularly with her mother. After a heartfelt conversation, Clara and her mother finally reached a place of understanding. It wasn't easy, but Clara knew that she needed to heal the past in order to move forward. Their bond grew stronger, and Clara began to see that forgiveness was not just about letting go of resentment. It was about accepting the people you loved for who they were, flaws and all. "I never meant to hold you back," her mother said, tears in her eyes. "I just didn't know how to let go." Clara reached out and held her mother's hand, offering the reassurance that they could both heal together. Clara realized that in order to truly move forward, she needed to embrace the future, but never forget the lessons of the past. This moment marked the beginning of a new chapter in their relationship, a chapter built on trust, love, and forgiveness. As Clara sat in the study, reflecting on how far she had come, she found herself at a crossroads. She had gained everything she had set out to achieve: the mansion, the empire, the respect of her peers. But what did it all mean if she was still emotionally lost? She looked out the window at the sprawling estate. It was hers now, but it didn't feel like home. Her journey had been filled with moments of triumph and pain, and Clara realized that the most important thing she could do was to take care of herself. For the first time, Clara allowed herself to pause and truly reflect on her emotional journey. She was no longer fighting just for revenge. She was fighting for her own peace. And that, Clara realized, was the most important victory of all. Her legacy would be defined not by what she had taken, but by what she had built and healed. Clara smiled, understanding now that the future held even more promise, if she could just allow herself to embrace it fully. The decision to sell the mansion was the most difficult Clara had ever made. The house had once symbolized the betrayal of her family, but now it was a symbol of everything she had overcome. Selling the mansion wasn't about giving up, it was about finally letting go of the past. Clara had spent so many years feeling like she had to prove herself, but now she realized that the mansion's value was tied to the pain she had endured. She wasn't defined by her inheritance, but by how she chose to shape the future. The house could be sold, but the lessons learned from it would stay with Clara forever. "It's time to move on," Clara said quietly to herself as she signed the papers. As she left the mansion for the last time, she felt an overwhelming sense of freedom. The world was waiting for her to build the empire she had always dreamed of, one not driven by anger but by purpose. The past was no longer holding her back. She was finally free. Despite everything Clara had achieved, the emotional weight of the past still lingered. She had spent so long focusing on the empire, the money, and the business that she realized she had neglected her emotional healing. The Hadleys had left scars on her soul that wouldn't be easily erased. Clara knew that forgiveness was essential for her to truly move forward. It wasn't just about forgiving the Hadleys for what they had done, but also about forgiving herself for the choices she made in her quest for power. She had been so focused on getting even that she had allowed the resentment to cloud her judgment. Now, standing in the mansion, Clara understood that the final step in her journey wasn't just about reclaiming what was hers. It was about letting go of the anger, the fear, and the past. Clara reached out to her mother, who had been the first person she had turned to when everything started. "We've both been hurt, Mom, but it's time to heal," Clara said softly, her voice filled with sincerity. Her mother, too, had carried the weight of betrayal, but Clara knew that healing was the only way they could move forward together. This was the first step toward forgiveness, and Clara was ready to embrace it. With her empire steadily growing, Clara knew she had achieved everything she set out to do. But now, it was time for new goals. She had gone from being the maid to the CEO, but what did that really mean? Clara spent months reflecting on the changes she had made in her life. She had reclaimed the mansion, the business, and her family's fortune. But the true legacy she wanted to leave behind wasn't just about the wealth. She envisioned an empire where the people who had once been oppressed by the system could find their own voice. Clara began working on initiatives that would help underprivileged communities, focusing on job creation, education, and sustainability. This wasn't about earning more wealth. It was about empowering others. Giving back to the communities that had always supported her would be her way of honoring her father's legacy while building a future where everyone could thrive. The rebuilding of her family's fortune had only been the beginning. Clara wasn't just an heiress to wealth. She was an architect of change, and she would use her position to create something meaningful. As Clara's empire continued to expand, the pressures mounted. She had fought for control, but now she realized the personal sacrifices it took to hold on to it. Clara's work was demanding, and the emotional toll began to show. There were moments when she felt burned out, isolated, and overwhelmed. The business meetings, the partnerships, the constant balancing act. She could barely keep up. At one point, she realized how much she had alienated herself from the people who mattered. "You're doing it all, Clara," Jenna had said once, her voice full of concern. "But at what cost?" Clara had dismissed the comment at first, but the truth was sinking in. The sacrifices were weighing her down. She hadn't taken time for herself, or for the people who had helped her along the way. Her mother, her employees, even the people who had supported her from the beginning, all were starting to feel neglected. "I can't keep going like this," Clara admitted one night, staring at the empty desk in front of her. "I need to change." Clara had worked so hard for this, but now it was time to take a step back and rediscover what really mattered: her own well-being, her relationships, and her integrity. With everything Clara had built, the most difficult part of her journey was realizing that it wasn't just about success and empire building. She had been consumed by the need to prove herself, first to the Hadleys, then to her family, and finally to the business world. But now she realized that true success wasn't just about winning or conquering, it was about finding balance. Clara took a few months off from the constant demands of the empire to rediscover herself. She spent time with her mother, rebuilding their relationship and reconnecting with the values she had lost along the way. Clara had been so focused on making a mark that she had forgotten the importance of relationships and inner peace. During her time off, she took walks through the gardens of the mansion, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. It wasn't just about taking control anymore. Clara was beginning to understand that power didn't have to be achieved through conflict. Sometimes it was about embracing compassion and humility, even when the world demanded strength. The day Clara returned to the boardroom, she felt a renewed sense of clarity. The empire she had built wasn't just a reflection of her ability to reclaim her inheritance. It was a reflection of the kind of person she had become. The business was thriving, but now Clara had shifted her focus. The mansion was no longer just a symbol of revenge, it had become a symbol of empowerment. Clara was now a leader who didn't just focus on profits, she focused on the people behind the success. The mansion was no longer a monument to the past, but a place of hope for the future. Clara had built something greater than wealth. She had built a legacy of compassion, resilience, and integrity. Her father's vision had been one of hard work and success, but Clara had taken that vision and transformed it into something that would change the world. The Hadleys, once the symbols of corruption and manipulation, were no longer relevant. Clara had reclaimed what was hers and had built something greater from the ashes. The world now knew her name. Clara Remington, the woman who had gone from maid to mogul, but more importantly, the woman who had used her power for good.